طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So tonight inshallah ta'ala we continue with Surat Al-Haqqah, and we had stopped last week at ayah number 8 and we're going to continue inshallah with ayah number 9. Quick recap. Surat Al-Haqqah is the third surah in this cluster of surahs, which is the 29th juz' from Al-Mulk to At-Tahrim, that talks about representing Islam, carrying Islam, and it addresses what the requirements are, what the needs are, what the methods are, and the surahs are pretty well described. Like it's not difficult to figure out like what the theme is for each surah if you have the general compass to guide you. And Surah Al-Mulk talked about the requirements in terms of knowledge, what you're required to know. And Qalam talked about what you're required to have in terms of ethics or principles. And Surah Al-Haqqah talks about what you're required to have in terms of spirituality, or closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it addresses the aspect of wa'adh, and it focuses on the state of the heart more than it does on anything else. And if you were following, or you attended the khutbah this week or listened to it at some point, then you know that when we talk about Islam, those are the three dimensions, or the three buckets, or the three pillars that you have to take care of. You have to understand the do's and the don'ts. You have to know the obligations, the mandates and the prohibitions. You have to know the theology, the belief system, and you also have to understand that for every action there is an aspect that is spiritual to it, an aspect that is psychological, mental, different than maybe the appearance or the apparent piece or the physical piece or the mechanical piece. And if you don't see that for everything, then you end up losing and missing out a lot, because there's a number of important realizations that Muslims have and carry as maxims. One of them being that not one of our acts of worship are guaranteed to be accepted. Like you and I live our lives without being able to ever declare that any of our acts of worship was for sure accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything's pending. Everything is in a position of just waiting for validation. And that should be something that worries us, because we don't know. We just don't know. What if you come Yawm al-Qiyamah and all the stuff that you were bargaining on to help you, to get you across the finishing line, to grant you or bring you Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's satisfaction and compassion, they're all rejected. And then what do you do? If you reject them, and if you reject them subhanahu wa ta'ala for valid reasons, and those reasons are usually not the mechanical stuff and the physical stuff and the adherence to the fiqh of it all, but rather the aspect of the spirituality, the peace that exists on the inside, the passion that is with it, and the intentions and the sincerity. Which is why this topic of Surat Al-Haqqah is very important. And it goes through it in a way of, so what is the piece that is connected with the spirituality? Reflection is. You spiritually grow by reflection, by contemplating things. Knowledge is different. When you think deeply or profoundly about a philosophical concept, you're not really reflecting. You're analyzing, you're critically thinking about it. Reflection is different. The first one is very scientific, it's algorithmic in nature, it's systematic. Right? When you're given math, or you're studying physics, or you're looking at, it's a very step-by-step type of thing. You're taking, there are a number of logical steps that you have to take, and then you have to draw conclusions, and then you have to hold those conclusions back in comparison to the maxims that generated it, and see if it's consistent. And then you have to run after that a number of trials to see if it holds. This is how we analyze pieces of information, of knowledge, that make sure that they line up. Reflection is different. Reflection is you having a friend, or having someone a little bit older than you, going through a very difficult situation, or losing their lives early, or getting sick, and then you reflect on your own mortality, or you reflect on what you would have done in that. This is not systematic. This is not algorithmic in any form or manner. When you reflect on something that happened to someone else, or an experience that someone else went through, that you have the potential to go through at some point, but you haven't so far, and how would you respond to it? How would you deal with it? What would you feel at that time? This is what reflection is. Reflecting on why it is, or or what's going to happen to you in the future. If you know that there are certain maxims regarding your life for the future, reflecting on the fact that that's going to be the case and how you're going to prepare yourself to it. This is reflection. Reflection is not systematic. It's not algorithmic. It's not step-by-step logical. It's very chaotic. It's very chaotic, and the chaos this dual processor that you have inside you have to allow it this space to reflect on these things, which is why Surat Al-Haqqah begins so dramatically with this repetition of a word that is almost like a hammer. Like the word itself sounds like someone's hitting something. And when you listen to Al-Haqqah, you listen to it, and even the sound of the word, just the rhythm of the word, even if you don't know Arabic at all, it's just very dramatic, it's very powerful. There's something, you know that this is not, that whatever is being said is not all cozy and cushiony, that it's not roses and rainbows. That what's being said is actually quite scary to some degree. And then it immediately goes into this reverse historical storytelling, where it starts talking about the groups or the nations that lived before the Prophet ﷺ. And it's going backwards because it's reflective. You don't start reflecting on the farthest thing away from you. You start reflecting on that which is the most proximal to you, right? That's the sensible thing to do. I don't start reflecting on things that happen far away in time and space when I have the opportunity to reflect on something that just happened right now, right in front of me, or recently. So you start with that which is the closest, and then you expand your reflection as you look at what's happening elsewhere. So in the Quran, usually when you read the stories of the Anbiya and the Aqwam, it's always chronological, starting with Nuh alayhi salam, and then it moves through the same Hud and Salih, and then Ibrahim and Lut and Shu'aib. It's the same almost in all of the. And then Surat Al-Haqqah, no, it starts with Thamud and then Ad. The only place. Everywhere else in the Quran, it's Ad, Thamud, right? Hud, Ad, Salih, Thamud. Every single time. Only in Surat Al-Haqqah. It's reversed. Why? Because it's reflective. It's reflective. It's asking you, it's commanding you, think about them. Think about what happened to them. Go reflect on what they once were and what they are now, and how quickly it all ended. Thamud, it was a one swift blow. Ad, it was a torturous, ongoing punishment of 8 days and 7 nights, basically destroying everything that they were. When you reflect on that, you learn something for yourself. So what is it that we're supposed to be learning here? The piece that we're supposed to be learning, and I'm sorry that the way that we live our lives today and the tendencies of the Western culture and other cultures, what you reflect upon is the fragility of your existence and the existence of the human race in general. We're very fragile. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of ending it all very, very quickly and very painfully as well, and in a just manner when it's deserved to be so. And that should generate a certain degree of fear of just punishment, not generalized fear. And it's important to understand that, because fear for the human being is a very, very useful tool. It's a very useful reaction and emotion that we have. Without it, the race would not have reached where we are today. We would have died a long time ago if we didn't have fear. Fear is what allows people to survive. If not regulated, it turns into something negative like cowardice, and it ruins the person's life, and it ruins their ethics and their principles altogether. But fear is an important thing. Islamically, we have to differentiate between the types of fear that you're asked to experience. There is human fear of worldly things. And that is the fear of loss of something that is dear to you, or the fear of oppression, or the fear of transgression, or the fear of lack of fairness and justice. The fear you have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not such. It's not like that. The fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the fear of deserved punishment, of just punishment, of being in a position where you deserve to be punished for what you've done. And you fear that justice catches up with you. Right? I don't fear that from you as a person. I fear that you mistreat me. If you treat me with justice, then we're good. That's all I want. I just want fairness from you. I just want fairness. I fear fairness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I fear that. I don't want him to be fair with me. Fair? That's horrible. There is no option that he's going to oppress me. Subhanahu wa ta'ala has stated that time and time again in the Quran, so I'm totally safe from that perspective. I have full safety and security, and you should too. You'll never be mistreated. But I fear fairness. I fear that he just gives me exactly what I deserve. No, that's not going to work. That's not a good equation for me. I need you to give me way more than I deserve, and to look past a lot of my shortcomings. So the fear that we have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a fear that would generate hate or that would generate resentment. It's a fear that is based in love and understanding that we are not performing at the level that we should be performing, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could at any point punish. Which is why he's talking to us, reflect on Thamud, and reflect on Ad. This is going to Quraysh, right? Quraysh, who were doing, at the time, exactly what Thamud and Ad had done back in their time, right? So Quraysh is being reminded, reflect. Quraysh, you feel strong. Thamud and Ad were stronger than you. Go and see what happened to them. See what we did to them. See how they don't exist anymore. Their legacy has been wiped off the map. There is no place to celebrate them. There is no one left to celebrate them. They're called in the science of the historical sciences of Islamic law. They're called al-Arab al-Ba'ida. Al-Ba'ida, the ones that disappeared. They disappeared. The Arab that disappeared altogether. And it's a hard concept because how do you disappear? If you know they did, and this has nothing to do with religious rhetoric. Like, it's not a religious rhetoric that they disappeared. No. This is what the Jahiliyyah people used to say. Those Arab are gone. Jurhum al-Ula wa Ad wa Thamud. They're gone. Nothing is left of them. We know nothing about them. We have no historic documents about them anymore. And of course, every once in a while they'll come up with something, but it's very scarce, and it's not in any way detailed, and it does not serve them justice in terms of the strength that they had during their times. So Allah is saying, reflect on that. How do you systematically? You can't systematically reflect on that. There's no algorithm that you use to reflect. Reflection is where you just sit there and you look at something, and just allow your psyche to absorb the potential of what happened to someone to happen to you, or the experience that someone had for you to have it at some point. That is not algorithmic, that is not logical, and does not follow a specific systematic method. And that's what reflection is. And reflection is spiritual in nature. And reflection is extremely important. It's a part. Recently, I have learned that people don't know how to do this. I learned this recently. I'll be very honest. I'm not very bright when it comes to certain things. And I imagine that I committed like a year and 9 months, or 2 years of a tazkiyah halaqah with people, assuming that they knew how to reflect and contemplate on things, only to find out they have no idea how to do it, and they weren't doing it at all. And I was wondering, and I was too dumb to even pick it up early enough, and I was just assuming that they did it. And when I felt like no one's really keeping up with the content and not really getting it, I'm like, why? It must be the culture. And then I found that people don't reflect. They don't reflect. I start to ask questions like, how much time do you reflect? A week or a day? And reflect? What do you mean? Like reflect. You sit there and you think about something. You just think about it. You just put the title and just let your brain chaotically look at it from different angles and take jabs at it, and just do that for a while, so that you can solidify your understanding of something. And they looked at me like I was speaking any different language. And I'm like, oh, so the last 2 years have been a complete waste of everyone's time. We have to go back and rewind again. Because you don't really you can't generate values and principles if you don't reflect on these abstract concepts. If we talk about the concept of honesty, this is an abstract concept. I can't go buy an honesty from the store and hold it here for you to show you what it is. It's just a thought. It's an abstract concept. You can't understand honesty, practice honesty, or appreciate honesty, or become an honest person unless you reflect deeply, profoundly on honesty, on the idea, on those who do it, on the consequences of it, on the reasons behind it, on why you should not do the opposite of it. This takes time. Children don't have the ability to contemplate and reflect when they're very young. So they just, whatever their parents reinforce for them, they take. And whatever their society reinforces for them, they'll take. But when they come to a certain age, when you're adolescent, you're adult, you have the ability to think about things. And it's a skill set that you have to, I think, Allahu A'lam, that earlier generations did this more for the reason that we had less distractions. Meaning, you didn't have much to do. Like you can only read for so long before your eyes start hurting, and you can only play sports for so long before your back starts hurting. And then you just have to sit there and stare at the clouds for a while, or dig a hole with a stick, or just do something mindless where your brain is processing things and you're thinking about stuff. But with this, with this dreadful black box that we all walk around with, there's no downtime anymore. There's no downtime. You're just running. I need more stimuli, and if you don't what you want, then you jump to another app. You want to be stimulated. We find it difficult to put it aside and just sit there. Daydreaming was a big deal. I remember daydreaming for hours, sitting in front of my window and just staring and just thinking about stuff. And imagination, what do you think imagination is? Imagination is your ability, it's what reflection is. It's where you run scenarios in your mind of things that could be, and things that may be, and things that will never be, and just experiment with what could happen in and this gives you, it helps you. Like if you're wondering, how do I treat this person? Well, before you go and do anything, sit for a moment and contemplate. Meaning, imagine if you go and you punch them in the face. Play that through. Play that scenario through. What's going to happen? Don't just think about the joy of your fist meeting their face. Think about what's going to happen right after. And then you start thinking about it, well, if that happens, that's not going to be nice. Well, maybe I can get some. And then you play it in a million ways, and in every single way you play it, it doesn't end well for you. Like it doesn't. The outcome, what happens later, does not make the sorrow and pain that comes afterwards does not justify the joy of actually doing it. So you think, well, what can I do? I'll say something mean. And then you think of something mean, and then you play it out. And it doesn't work either because and you keep on, and then you figure out the response that works. That's contemplation. And then you walk in. This is not systematic, algorithmic, or logical. It's just called reflection. And people who don't reflect are people who suffer on many levels in life, and specifically spiritually they will. Which is why Surat Al-Haqqah is going backwards. Think about, you saw how it happened to Thamud. You saw what happened to Ad. And then you can talk about in a moment when we read the verses. Fir'aun, and those who came before him. And then Nuh, he's going backwards, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Think about these people. Think about how they were before. Think about what happened to them. Think about the fact that this could easily happen to you too. That you are not immune to any of this. And if you don't do that in life, if you're like, no, I'm not, that's not going to happen to me. The miskeen. If you don't have the ability to reflect on something that happened and say, that could happen to me. If you don't have that ability, somehow you put yourself in a different category, well, no, that's not going to happen to me. Then I'll tell you that 90% of the Quran is going to be meaningless to you. Like you've lost 90%, most of the Quran is not going to mean anything to you. Oh, the kafirin, I'm not a kafir. Munafiqin, no, that's not me either. Fasiqin, nope, not me. What do you mean? No. Mu'minin, that's me. Mu'minin, that's me. No, you don't get it. You don't get it. The verses that are chastising and pointing out mistakes, it's there for you to contemplate. What if you ended up like that? Why do you think we have the story of Iblis every couple of surahs? Story of Iblis. Why? So that we can enjoy chastising him? No, because of the potential of what happened to him happening to me. And if you don't feel that way, if you don't see things that way, then you're missing out on what the Quran is teaching you. And this is the biggest problem. We listen to what happened to Thamud and Ad. You're like, no, that wouldn't happen to us. Really? I like your confidence. Where do you get your confidence from? How do you know that? How do you know this is something that would never happen to you? Saying that is very arrogant. And there's su'adab ma'Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a lack of etiquette with Allah to say something like that or think. It's like saying, no, yeah, I'm reading these verses, but there's nothing in it for me. I'm going to wait later on. Something will come. No, this is for you and I. We're supposed to read these and think about them and reflect on what happened to them so that it doesn't happen to us. And that's the only way for you to grow spiritually. There's no other way. We have to reflect on what happened to those who came before us and around us. You see someone who lost a loved one. You have to be able to put yourself in that position. In order for you to be ready for when it happens to you, you have to be able to put yourself in that position and reflect upon that. If you act like it's not my problem, well, your family's going to live forever. You're going to live forever. You're immune to masa'ib. You're immune. What are you talking about? Reflection does not lead to you becoming miserable and depressed where every bad thing that happened, you start You don't become a hypochondriac and a person. No, that's not what I'm trying to talk about here. But you should have the ability to empathize and reflect so that you can grow. That it's, instead of having to go through every experience yourself, reflection is I don't want to say a cheap way, but it's a much easier way to gain the experience, gain the knowledge from what happened without necessarily having to go through it. It's a beautiful, beautiful tool and ability. It's like a superpower. It really is. It's like a superpower that you carry as a person that no animals do it. Like animals don't have that ability. Like it takes them a very long time to figure out where not to stand. Like and what to watch out for. Like the stupidity sometimes of it is very annoying. Like, yeah, Habibi, he's gonna eat you there. Like every gazelle who stood there before you was eaten. Don't you see the blood? And he goes stands there. It takes them a long time to pick up any form of. But the human being is different. You have the ability to reflect really quickly. You see one example, then you make connections right away. When you lose that ability, for whatever reason, then it becomes an actual problem for you, for me as well. Like we struggle when we lack. And that's why, honestly, one of the biggest problems for me, in masajid all over it's the same stuff. It is agonizing. It is absolutely agonizing. It's the same problems, same complaints, same concerns, same failures, same fights, same dispute. Everywhere. You can go anywhere, drop it, same complete. Sit with a bunch of people who are in a masjid, they will say the exact same thing. Wallahi, the same words. It's actually boring. It's actually mind-numbingly boring. You go anyway. We go to Canada, go to London, the original London in UK, or go to China, or go anywhere and find Muslims sit there. Oh, our kids aren't learning Arabic, and oh, the school system is this, and oh, we don't have engagement of our youth, and oh, the identity, and oh, there's nothing. And you're like, well, are you using a cheat sheet? It's the same stuff that I had before. It's the same things. When you don't learn, when you don't go and reflect and see what the people did before you, that was helpful, and that was not helpful, and you avoid those mistakes, and you take on the good stuff, then you don't really move forward. Reinventing the wheel. Imagine, they use the term, right? Reinventing the wheel. It's a good term. Imagine if every group had to figure out the wheel. Imagine if you had to start from zero every time. You're born now. First of all, figure out fire, and figure out the wheel, and figure out, la ya akhi. We've done that. You just take what they've already done and reflect on some of their failures and then move forward with something new. And the Quran is very big on this piece. And I'm saying this because I don't want you to read these verses with a mindset that is not prepared to benefit from what it's saying. Because you just read if you read them as a story, it's a nice story. And the Shaykh told us how Salih Naqa, his Naqa came out and what it looked like. And if you just listen to it as a story, it defeats, to a certain degree, it defeats the purpose. To a certain degree, it defeats the purpose of the whole story. The Quran is very reflective. That's why when you listen to me tell you the story of Badr, for example, the battle, and then I read the verses from the Quran, it's very different. The story I tell you, Umayr ibn al-Himam throwing away the tamrat and going into the battle, and Haritha ibn Suraqa getting the early arrow, and his mother being, and then Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, and all these beautiful moments in Badr. The Quran doesn't talk about any of those stuff. The Quran says, إِذْ يُرِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَنَامِكَ قَلِيلًا وَلَوْ أَرَاكَهُمْ كَثِيرًا لَفَشِلْتُمْ. You saw them in your vision to be less than they actually were, and if he showed you in your vision that the mushrikeen were more than they were, you would have all failed. Imagine that. وَلَتَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, and you would have fought amongst each other. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ سَلَّمَ, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected and saved you from that. That's a reflective piece. Reflect, O Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Reflect on the fact that with a small variation, a small change in your morale and would have changed the attitude, would have changed the outcome. A small change in morale. It would make you see something, wake up in the morning, seeing in the vision that they were way more than they actually were. It would have caused your morale to drop. That would have caused a change in the attitude of the Sahaba around you. You would have failed. You'd have fought amongst each other, and the whole thing would have gone sideways. Subhanallah. This is what he wants you to think about, subhanahu wa ta'ala. I like telling you that. I tell that piece of the story at the end. But I enjoy telling you that what actually happened. I tell you about Mu'adh and Mu'awwadh. They go and they kill Abu Jahl, and Abu Mas'ud stands on his belly and he says stuff. These are the fun stories, the stuff that people want to listen to. But listen to the Quran. It's different. The Quran is very, very much like, yeah, that all happened. Great. Did you learn? Learn. Learn how easily this could have been different. Make sure that you prepare yourselves in a different way next time. Make sure that you're in the right mindset next time, because easily this could have went the opposite direction. So we'll start with ayah number 9, inshallah ta'ala. And we'll try and make our way midway to the safha, to the page, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وجاء فرعون ومن قبله والمؤتفكات بالخاطئة فعصوا رسول ربهم فأخذهم أخذة رابية إنا لما طغى الماء حملناكم في الجارية لنجعلها لكم تذكرة وتعيها أذن واعية. So here's where the reflective piece on the previous nations ends. So he talked about كذبت ثمود وعاد بالقارعة. Talked about Thamud and Ad, and then detailed فأما ثمود وأما عاد فأهلكوا. And then that's going back historically in the Arabian Peninsula. Outside the Arabian Peninsula, he's going back subhanahu wa ta'ala. He starts with Fir'aun, and before Fir'aun is the Qawm of Lut alayhi salam, and before them is the Qawm of Nuh, right? Because again, it's proximity of reflection. وَجَاءَ فِرْعَوْنُ, and Fir'aun alayhi la'natullah, وَمَنْ قَبْلَهُ, and those who came before him. And you can see the wording before him there it makes it very clear that this is going backwards. وَالْمُؤْتَفِكَاتِ. Al-Mu'tafikat is a name that the Quran uses to describe the people of Qawm Lut alayhi salam. Al-Ifk is إِنَّ الَّذِينَ جَاءُوا بِالْإِفْكِ عُصْبَةٌ مِّنْكُمْ, right? So al-Ifk is an act, is a lie that has no basis at all, that is very harmful, and the harm of it can spread in multiple directions. That's why we have different words for kadhib. There's kadhib, and there's iftira, and there's buhtan, and there's ifk. And ifk is the worst of all. And the word ifk is not just about rumors or words, it's also about actions. So an action that is absolutely despicable, that has no justification whatsoever, and there's no reason for it to have ever happened to begin with, and there's no good argument for it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls what they do al-ifk. Which is why the people of Qawm Lut are called al-Mu'tafikat, the people who performed the actions of ifk within their place and time. And of course, the reflective piece on that goes without saying that the Quran's opinion on what Qawm Lut were doing is a very harsh one, for sure. And this is and will always be a major difference in how we as Muslims understand the world and how the Western culture decides today to understand the world, especially the liberal narrative that exists today. And it's not just within that action specifically. Sexuality and the expression of sexuality is something that we differ upon heavily. Abrahamic faiths in general, but Islam specifically. We differ heavily with the Western world over the expression of sexuality and what that means. We live in a time, in a place where the expression of sexuality is seen to be very, very flexible. It's very open. That gender fluidity concept has been introduced heavily within media and within the academic realm as well. And this has become something accepted amongst a lot of high influential people within this part of the world. That is the opposite of how Islam sees the expression of sexuality, which is very restricted. It's very restricted. There's a whole social system that is designed to protect and to keep it very well regulated. The whole social system of the hijab for women and for men, and ghad al-basar for women and for men, and zawaj, and how it happens, and the nature of the relationship between men and women, and how it's regulated. and what is acceptable and what is not, and how they're supposed to speak to one another, and how they're supposed to coexist with each other, and how all of these rules and these laws are a part of a social system that is based on an understanding of how we express and experience our sexuality. The world today sees it very, very differently, almost to the point where we are lacking common ground now. We're at a point where we're lacking common ground. Like it's hard to obviously have discussions with people who you don't have some commonality with. I need commonality with you so we can stand on the ground that we both agree upon, and then we can have some discussions and figure out where our parameters are, and then we can coexist in an appropriate and respectful way. We're starting to lack commonality with this narrative, for sure. We're starting to find it more and more difficult to agree on anything, because there's an ongoing, not just acceptance, but an encouragement of adultery and fornication that goes in any direction that you want. Like before, it was men and women, and at least we understood that, and we could talk about. Now it's fornication and adultery that goes in any direction. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be. It's not even like homosexuality is not even the issue anymore. It could be anything. It could be a beamer, a wall, a horse, a car, and no one cares anymore. Like the degree of fluidity that now exists is extremely, extremely difficult to understand, and it's hard to have a coherent argument or discussion on the topic altogether, because for us, we have, when it comes to sexuality, it's one way of expressing it. Like as a human being, I express my sexuality in one form only. It's with someone from the opposite sex within the constitution of marriage. That's it. There's no other. I don't express my sexuality any other way. You're not allowed to. If you do, you're at fault for it immediately. This is Islam. I'm sorry. This is how our deen works. A person can't go around expressing his sexuality and practicing it with anyone else. If you do that, you're in trouble. As a man, you get in severe trouble, and as a woman, the same thing. So no, we're growing up in a place where, as you grow up, you can experiment, quote unquote, and try different things. And there are certain experiments that children, adolescents will experience in their lives. That is normal. That's a normal part of just growing up. Thoughts and feelings and things. These things are a part of the human experience in general. But I'm talking about as an adult, as a conscious, deciding adult, that you go ahead and you experience with your sexuality with this person for a couple of years, maybe with nothing involved. Maybe you have children, maybe you don't. Then you move on to someone else, and maybe that person is from a different gender altogether. And it's just, this is open, whatever you're comfortable, as long as there's consent. Zina has consent. Consent doesn't mean anything for us as Muslims, at least not in the hurma of it. Rape in Islam, the punishment for it is execution. Is considered ifsad fil ard. إنما جزاء الذين يحاربون الله ورسوله ويسعون في الأرض فسادا أن يقتلوا أو يصلبوا أو تقطع أيديهم وأرجلهم من خلاف. The scholars have seen rape, the act of rape, to be ifsad fil ard. This person not only can be executed, this person can be crucified. This person can be nailed to a cross to do something like that. This is how rape is seen in Islam. This is how bad it is as an action. And zina is one of the worst sins, if not the number one cardinal sin, it's number two. Takes a second, only to murder. And I'm removing the ritualistic ones like shirk and whatnot. I'm removing that out of the argument here. It's a problem that we face here in the West. And I know people who have left this country wanting to avoid it. I tell you the following. I do not believe, and this is my personal way of looking at it, I don't believe that you ever benefit from running away from a problem. Never. I've never seen that work. I believe that if you run away from a problem, it will follow you wherever you go. And if it doesn't follow you in its same form, it'll come in a worse form. Like you run away from one problem, you just find another one. Wherever you are, as long as you're not being oppressed in your religion, meaning you're not being denied your right to practice your faith, which is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines as al-mustad'afin. And He tells them, if you're mustad'af, meaning if you're someone who is oppressed within your ability to express your faith, then you need to leave. يهاجر في الأرض يجد في الأرض ومن يهاجر يجد في الأرض مراغما كثيرا وسعة. You find there's a lot. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الأرض واسعة. There's a lot of places to go. Go to a place where you're not oppressed within your faith. But if you're not oppressed and you have the ability to practice your faith, it's just you're living in a place that's not great. It's not always the best idea to, I'm going to run away to somewhere else, especially these days where where there's no lack of communication anymore. I grew up, when I grew up in the Saudis in the 90s, in Saudi Arabia in the 90s, and then I grew up in our village in Syria in the early 2000s. It's a very different landscape, wallah. Like the world was different. Like communication was very limited. It was just the landlines that children today don't even know what they are. They think, they think it's a typewriter. They have no idea what it is. They've never seen it before. The landlines, that's the only way. Someone would call you, and if you didn't pick up, khalas, they couldn't. If I got into a public transportation and went to Damascus, no one had any idea about anything about me until I came back. Like because there was no cell phones, there was no internet. It's very different. Today, no. Today, we have enough money to broadcast the pain of people who are dying from war and starvation, just not enough money to help them. Which is a paradox that continues to make my life very difficult. Like, we have enough money and technology to literally, in real time, document someone dying, but we just don't have enough to feed them, or to save them, or to take care of them. And that's a reality that we are living in. That's it's novel, and it's never existed before. So we can't act like a human race that we understand how to deal with this yet. It's very confusing. So if you run away from a problem today, like unless you are going to cut your children and yourself off the world, like, then the problem is going to come. It's going to be you're sitting in your living room. Like it's just surreal. It's just something. And if you're going to cut off social media, might as well stay here then and just do that. You'll be fine. If you have a better standard of life, anyways, it's a better standard of living to begin with if you do that. And that's a whole different discussion, like whether how much of this poison you want to continue to consume on a daily basis. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and Fir'aun and those who came before him, and the mu'tafikat, they all came to Allah with al-khati'ah. Al-khati'ah mean an action that was consciously wrong. Al-khati'ah, there's a difference between khati' and mukhti'. Khati' is someone who is wrong and they know they're wrong. Mukhti' is someone who made a mistake, and they're different. So khati', no, is someone who knew that this action was wrong, they did it anyways. They did it because they wanted to do it. They did it because they didn't care about consequences. They did it because at that time they felt that they were invincible, or they were untouchable, or it was somehow justified for them to do it even though they know it's wrong. And that's al-khati'ah that's a big problem. Al-mukhti' is you have more of a chance there to get away with things because you made a mistake. You make mistakes, everyone makes mistakes. Al-khati' is different where you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says they all came with al-khati'. فَعَصَوْا رَسُولَ رَبِّهِمْ. They all disobeyed the prophet or the messenger of their Lord. فَأَخَذَهُمْ أَخْذَةَ الرَّابِيَةِ. So he took them subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the word akhadh in Arabic is a very dynamic word and it's used in many, many different ways. And here, al-akhadh, as he says in other verses, akhadh azizin muqtadir, is to take them, as in take them through punishment, as in take them to him, as in end their lives, end their existence on the planet, and take them all to him subhanahu wa ta'ala, where they exist in alam al-barzakh. فَأَخَذَهُمْ أَخْذَةَ الرَّابِيَةِ. Rabia is swift and quick. That's what rabia means. I mean, when I take them in a swift and uninterrupted manner, in a way that they have no ability to put up a fight. They can't push back at it. They have nothing. And then he points out subhanahu wa ta'ala, going backwards in reflection, inna, he does it in a different way this time. Indeed, lamma طغى الماء. Indeed, when the water transgressed and went beyond its normal state, طغى الماء. He's talking about the flood subhanahu wa ta'ala that happened at the time of Nuh alayhi salam. Indeed, we carried you, حملناكم. And here's where the verse kind of brings it all together, like when he uses this term, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, حَمَلْنَاكُمْ, we carried you. Meaning that when he was saying these words to us, subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the beauty of the Quran. When you hear that word, now you're able to tie everything that you were listening to before together. That he is, subhanahu wa ta'ala, saying, as a human race, reflect on what has happened to you before. The number of times you collectively have made mistakes, and the number of times these mistakes have cost you. And remember that when the water rose beyond its normal limits and went against what it was, water is always in the Quran the symbol of life, right? It's the symbol of life. So it's ironic in the story of Nuh that is what killed everyone. What made them live is what's going to take their lives at the same time. So it's a big, it's an analogy of profoundness that the Quran brings up. When the water went against its nature, which is to grant life, and it طغى, and it went against the human race. حَمَلْنَاكُمْ فِي الْجَارِيَةِ. We carried you within the boat. Al-Jariya, al-Jara is to run. Al-Jariya is one of the names that the Arabs have for ships and boats and وله الجوار المنشآت ومن آياته الجوار في البحر كالأعلام. الجواري meaning those that run. It's like they're sailing or running within the water, and it's just the way that it's described. So حملناكم في الجارية, we carried you within that which ran above the water and not under it. لنجعلها لكم تذكرة, so that all of this can be made for you تذكرة, as a reminder, as a point of reflection. And beyond that, وَتَعِيَهَا. Al-wa'i is consciousness. That's what wa'i is. Another word meaning for it is awareness. So وَتَعِيَهَا, meaning, and something is going to be aware of it. أُذُنٌ وَاعِيَةٌ, an aware ear, so that it may be comprehended, understood, reflected upon by an aware ear. The ear itself is not aware, obviously, or conscious, but this is within the Arabic language. The information is being carried to that has that consciousness, that has that wa'i, that has that awareness. If you have awareness and you have consciousness, then all of these things, what happened to Thamud, what happened to Ad, and what happened to Fir'aun and those who stood by him, and all of the people before Fir'aun, what happened to the Mu'tafikat, the people of Lut, and what happened to Nuh and his people on that day of the flood, all of this is there for you as a reminder and a point of contemplation that an aware, conscious mind can take something, ta'iyaha, can learn, can become aware because of it. He explained to us what the benefit of all this is. What does reflection and contemplation give you? It gives you wa'i. Ta'i shay'an, meaning you understand something now. Now you have clarity on something. Now it makes sense to you. It makes sense to you what you need to do and what you need to avoid, because you've seen the pattern. You've seen how many times this has happened. So now you have no question. This is too clear. Now I understand what I need to do, how I need to avoid this outcome, how I can actually change my destiny so I don't end up there. This is what the Prophet ﷺ was worried about. The Prophet ﷺ was worried about what happened to Thamud and Ad and Fir'aun and Mu'tafikat and the people of Nuh that was going to happen to Quraysh at some point. He was scared that this was going to be the outcome for Quraysh at some point, his people, his family, his tribe, his city. He didn't want that for them. He didn't want that for them, despite all of what they did, despite of how hateful they were towards him, alayhi salatu wasalam, and to what degree another person would have become very disgruntled and would have hoped that they would be destroyed, but he never did, alayhi salatu wasalam, because all of these verses in the Quran, the Mekki Quran, were there to remind him that this happened before, and it can happen. So don't be careless about what you wish for. Don't be careless about what you hope for, because it happened before, it can happen again. Beware. He didn't want that for them. That's why he never made dua against them. That's why when Malakul Jibal came to him and said, "Utbiq alayhim al-akhshabain," you want me to crumble the two mountains upon the people of Thaqif and Hawazin and Mecca and kill them all? And he said, no. That's why on the day of Uhud, when he was bleeding out of his face, alayhi salatu wasalam, after seeing his uncle fall, and Allahumma ghfir li qawmi, fa innahum la, oh Allah, forgive my people, they don't know what they're doing. فَإِنَّهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. They have no consciousness of what they're doing. They're mistaken and they're lost. They don't have knowledge of what they're doing. And you find this throughout his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, time and time again, because he reflected on these things. He didn't want that to be the case. Because Allah said, the day came where we carried you, because we're one. As a human race, we are one. We're one, even though we feel that we're divided, and we like to believe that we're divided, but we're not. We're just one big consciousness that exists. And all the experiences of the human race are our experiences. And when we divide amongst ourselves, it's a pain. It's weakening of a body. It's weakening of that unit. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He's speaking here in the reflective piece, He says, حَمَلْنَاكُمْ, we carried you one day. Carried me? I was never in a ship. I've never been in a ship in my life. Yeah, no, حَمَلْنَاكُمْ, as your race, as your people. You were there. You were there even though you weren't there. We carried you that day. And all of these stories are for you, so as a reminder for you. May an aware ear comprehend them. وَتَعِيَّهَا أُذُنٌ وَاعِيَةٌ. May a conscious ear, may a conscious listener be aware of these things, understand them, comprehend them, benefit from them. And that's what we're hoping, inshallah, that we are capable of doing, inshallah. We continue. He moves on, subhanahu wa ta'ala, the reflective piece on the stories of the Anbiya before is over. Now the reflective piece moves on to a different story. Now he moves to Yawm al-Qiyamah. And I argue that these verses in Surat Al-Haqqah are probably amongst the most moving, the most powerful ayat that exist in the entirety of the Quran. If you think about it, they all end with a ha, right? It's rare in the Quran. It's not a lot of surahs. Al-Waqi'ah, Al-Ghashiyah, a couple of them, but really, honestly, not many surahs in the Quran end with a ta' marbuta or a ha. And when you recite an ayah that ends with a ha, a part of it comes from the chest. So it's almost like it's a sigh. It's almost like you're sighing at the end of every verse. And when you're reading these small verses, these very short verses, with a sigh at the end of each of them, it's almost like you're in tears when you're not. Like it's almost like you're sobbing when you're not really sobbing. Just with the effect of that ha at the end of every ayah. And it picks up pace now. Like the verses get shorter and quicker. And the ha, you hear the ha again and again and again. And it's just there for you to reflect upon. That it's almost like you're listening to the breathing of the people who are standing on that day. Like that ha that we're hearing at the end of each verse, it's almost like the breathing sounds, the breath sounds of the people who are standing on the day of judgment. And I just find that to be, like, from an artistic perspective, to be absolutely magnificent. So we'll start, inshallah, with ayah number 13. فَإِذَا نُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ نَفْخَةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ وَحُمِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ وَالْجِبَالُ فَدُكَّتَا دَكَّةً وَاحِدَةً فَيَوْمَئِذٍ وَقَعَتِ الْوَاقِعَةُ وَانشَقَّتِ السَّمَاءُ فَهِيَ يَوْمَئِذٍ وَاهِيَةٌ وَالْمَلَكُ عَلَى أَرْجَائِهَا وَيَحْمِلُ عَرْشَ رَبِّكَ فَوْقَهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ ثَمَانِيَةٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ تُعْرَضُونَ لَا تَخْفَى مِنكُمْ خَافِيَةٌ. So he says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَإِذَا نُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ. When the time comes, and it is blown within the horn, فِي الصُّورِ. One blow. And here he's referring to the second blow. And if you want details about, there's no place in the Quran where all of Yawm al-Qiyamah is talked about. Not one place. It's just snapshots of different parts of Yawm al-Qiyamah here and there, scattered all throughout the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as reflective points. If you understood what I've been talking about in the Surat Al-Haqqah, then you'll be able to actually benefit from these pieces in the Quran effectively. Because they're reflective points. They're there for you to listen, reflect, and think, what if I was in that position? What if I was the person there? How would I feel? How do I avoid that? And then now you have something to work towards. Now you have an action plan, something to contemplate and to try and improve in your life. And I did a series in the first... I think it was the first Ramadan that we opened here, so 2022. After Fajr, it was called Stages of the Hereafter. It's a 20 or 21 episode series on YouTube and Facebook. You can listen. And I go through the details of the stages of death and the barzakh and nafkh al-ula and nafkh al-thani and all of the little stages of Yawm al-Qiyamah. If this is something that you want to learn more about, you can go back and I'm not going to go through all of that, inshallah, within the surah, obviously, because it becomes way too long and it'll take forever for us to finish this. I'll just contemplate with you that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pointed out within Surat Al-Haqqah. But if you have more questions about this, you can go listen and you can get a better understanding of the sequence of events that are going to occur. So here he is talking subhanahu wa ta'ala about that about that second nafkha. فَإِذَا نُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ نَفْخَةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ. And when the time comes and it is blown within the horn, one blow. وَحُمِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ. And he's using this in the tense, in the in Mabni al-Majhul. What is that in English? Something was done, instead of saying someone did something. Passive what? Passive something. Passive. Yeah, so what is that called? Passive. Okay. We'll find out and we'll add it to the thing next time. But it's passive of something, you're right. I just can't think of the word for it. So and you'll find this in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't state the one who is doing it, even though we know who is doing it. We know in Nafikh al-Sur is going to be one of the malaika. They're going to do it. He's called Nafikh al-Sur. He has a name. That's his name. He's the malak who's going to blow into the horn. So we already know. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he talks about this in that tense, where it's going to be blown into the horn. Why? And the Quran does that. It is purposeful to take your focus from anything else aside from the event itself. If I state that someone is going to do it, then I'm giving it two pieces of information. What's going to happen and who's doing it. So now your focus is divided between the two pieces of information that you have. The one who's doing it and what's happening. When the Quran does not want you to waste time thinking about something else, it will use this tense so that the one who's doing it is ignored. Just forget about that. Think about what's going to happen. Think about the fact that the horn is going to be blown in. And then everything that died beforehand will be resurrected. Everything that was once alive and died is all going to come back. And will find life again in a process that we don't understand and we will never understand. And it's one of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's secrets and in His majesty and divinity that He will resurrect us all. And what happens on that day? وَحُمِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ وَالْجِبَالُ. And the earth and the mountains will be carried. Again, be carried. Who is going to do it? Well, it's the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's some of the malaika who will be involved. But forget about who. Just think about what is going to occur. The earth and the mountains will be carried. فَدُكَّةً. And then they will be slammed. See, it's all in that passive tense. And they will be slammed. A duck is when you slam something. When you hit it real hard so that it gets buried. Right? A duck, they use the word for large tents. So when the Arab obviously lived in tents. And that's not like your little cute camping tent that you go. No, we're talking about tents that are as big as homes. Like as big as this area. So the tent is huge. It required like 15 to 20 men to set up the beamers within the tent to make it. And then they would put within the ground a deck. They would pound it down into the ground until it was buried. You couldn't see it anymore. They would keep on hitting it until you could not see anything left of it, because that's the only way to ensure that the rope was sturdy enough. So فَدُكَّةَ دَكَّةً وَاحِدَةً. They're going to be carried, the earth and the mountains, and they're going to be slammed down to where they were before, one time, leaving nothing. Nothing will be visible anymore. They'll all be gone with one strike. And of course, when that happens, يوم القيامة. So what is فَيَوْمَئِذٍ? And on that day, وَقَعَتِ الْوَاقِعَةِ. The inevitable falling or occurrence. Al-Waqi' in Arabic, if you say the word waqi', then you can say either something falling or reality. Right? Like depending on how you want to translate this in what context. So al-waqi'ah is the divine reality. That's the meaning of it. The unavoidable reality. Undisputed occurrence that's going to become at a certain point reality. Similar to Al-Haqqah, but Haqqah has within it the concept of the truth. That it's going to be an occurrence that will be not only truthful, but it will bring forward only the truth. Where only the truth will be tolerated from now on. No lying will be accepted. And no deceit. And only the truth. Al-Waqi'ah, this is now going to be the reality. This is a divine reality. There's no, you can't escape this. The reason that he uses these words, subhanahu wa ta'ala, is because as people, these concepts, the truth and reality, these are concepts that we often figure out ways to avoid. in our lives. Like as you go through life, we often figure out ways to avoid both facing the truth, speaking the truth, and standing for the truth, and avoiding our personal realities. Most of us don't like our realities. Most of us look for ways to escape our own reality and find an alternative of some sort. Or sometimes we make up an alternative of some sort. Or sometimes we actually physically leave so that we don't have to deal with our own realities. And it has never been shown that this was of any benefit for anyone. When you have your reality is yours and you are stuck with it, and no matter whether you like it or you don't, you have to figure a way to accept it and deal with it. Remember when we talked about in Surat Al-Qalam how the three young gentlemen, when they came to the piece of land, it was burnt to the ground. They went through those 5 stages of grief, right? The ayat like pointed them out. And one of those stages of grief is denial, right? What is denial? Denial is just the refusal of reality. He says, I don't want it. I don't like this reality. I don't like it. And because of what I do in terms of my work, I face this with people all the time. Like it's a very, very intimate and recurrent theme of what I face and have to deal with people. And I remember one day, it was a very elderly lady, and she was very elderly to the point where maybe a part of me didn't feel as empathetic as I should have for the diagnosis that she had, because she was well above 80, well beyond 85, and quite ill. I remember that when I was talking to her on the ward one day, and she was very tearful and upset. She said something to me in a moment of, she's like, I just wish I didn't have this. And she kept on saying that. I just wish I didn't have this. And it resonated with me. It resonated with me a lot, because that's really where what we get stuck with. Where here's the reality. Your reality is this. You don't like it. You don't like it. And if you have no way to get rid of it, no way to change it, no way to face it, then in a moment of weakness, all you can say is, I wish I didn't have it. And then you just crumble. And you just crumble psychologically and emotionally and you deny it and you get depressed until you're able to actually deal with your reality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Yawm al-Qiyamah. He says, فَيَوْمَئِذٍ, and on that day, وَقَعَتْ, what will occur is the divine reality. The divine reality, the unavoidable one. Because from that moment forward, this is the reality. There's no other reality. What will the person say that day? So you understand what I'm saying. Some people will say, يَا لَيْتَنِي كُنْتُ تُرَابًا. Why? Different reality. Different reality. I don't want this one. Can you turn me into something else? Change my reality. Or someone goes to the wrong destination, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, and they'll ask, can you أَخْرِجْنَا مِنْهَا فَإِنْ عُدْنَا فَإِنَّا ظَالِمُونَ, or send us back to earth again. Repeat the whole system. Ya Rabb, repeat the whole system. We'll behave better this time. Or turn us into nothing. Just dissolve us into the fabric of the universe. We don't want to exist anymore. Or take us and put us somewhere. Why? Because the reality that they have, they don't like it. They don't want it. But فَيَوْمَئِذٍ, this is the wording. This is the power of this wording. But on that day, وَقَعَتِ الْوَاقِعَةِ, that divine reality will occur. That's it. There's nothing to change that. Either you were prepared for it or you weren't. It's as simple as that. Either you had knowledge of this and you had awareness of this and you had contemplated this, you had reflected on this before. And that reflection and that contemplation and that spiritual process of thought and acceptance allowed you to do something about it, change your way so that this reality would be something that you were able to cope with, or it wasn't. وَانشَقَّتِ السَّمَاءُ, and the cosmos on that day will be torn apart. They'll tear. The fabric of the cosmos will tear. فَهِيَ يَوْمَئِذٍ, and the cosmos on that day, وَاهِيَةٌ, it's extremely weak. It's almost like nothing. That this fabric of the universe that is thick and filled with matter, filled with stars that we can't even fathom. Like when even someone sits here and explains how far away they are, how huge they are, how much they're burning at every given moment, and how many of them, we can't really understand. I don't understand 100 billion anything. I don't understand 100 billion as a number. I don't even comprehend it as a number to be able to imagine anything. But on that day, it'll tear, and it'll be in a state of true weakness. We'll stop with that inshallah ta'ala, and we'll continue the explanation of these verses next week. Subhanakallah bihamdik, la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina wa habibina wa qurrati a'yunina Muhammad wa ala alihi